Hi, I'm Nicole Ferraro, and this is The Divide, a podcast from Light Reading exploring the ongoing digital divide, why and where it still exists, and what needs to be done to get people everywhere connected to reliable, high-speed internet. Today, I'm joined by Kent Blackwell, Chief Administrative Officer with the Delta Montrose Electric Association and its fiber broadband arm, Elevate Fiber, located in Colorado. Back in late 2021, the electric cooperative was awarded grant funding from the American Rescue Plan's State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund to build out a fiber optic network to the rural Montrose community and Gunnison National Park. We discussed the details of that since completed project, including the importance of having fiber connectivity at the national park, the role that horses played in the fiber deployment, and much more. Kent, welcome to the podcast. So nice to meet you. How's it going?
Good. Nice to meet you as well.
Awesome. I'm so excited to have you on today to talk about this fiber project that has impacted the Montrose community as well as Gunnison National Park. But before we get into all of that, first, I'd love to just have you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the region that you're sitting in of Montrose, Colorado.
Okay. Kent Blackwell, Chief Administration Officer for DMEA, the electric co-op for the area, as well as Elevate Fiber, our internet company. Been here 7 years. The Elevate build-out has been going for 8 years now. So Montrose is a community. It's a population of 21,000 people here in the city. It's a fairly small western slope Colorado town, if you will. The whole county is only 42,000 people. So, the city of Montrose accounts for half of the whole county's population. But yeah, it's a rural living kind of atmosphere for sure.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned Elevate Fiber's been underway for about 8 years. Is that what you said?
Yes. Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about DMEA, the Electric Association, and how DMEA initially got into launching Elevate Fiber.
Good. DMEA has been around for 87 years. So the electric co-op started with back in the 1930s, building electricity to the rural parts of Colorado back then, and much to that same kind of spirit of, anybody that wanted electricity in the rural areas, you could become a member of the co-op. The fiber project is kind of taken on that same kind of energy. It's fast forward 80 years, and this fiber build out's, following that same path that we followed 80 years ago. We had I'd say around 60 members of the community somehow became aware that DMEA was building fiber to each of our electric substations, and just for their frustrations with the current state of broadband services in the area, the cost of the services, the unreliability of those services, those members came to one of our board meetings and just really insisted that our board members take a strong look at opening up that fiber optic network that was being built for those electric substations and expand on it to provide a modern broadband service that was affordable, reliable, and sustainable for the communities.
Excellent. And I know we're going to talk more about this specific project that got funding through the American Rescue Plan and that benefited the park overall. But I am interested a little bit more in the origin story here because, so many communities in Colorado, I think, have taken their broadband futures into their own hands, whether it was municipal communities that wanted to be able to launch their own networks before the law even changed to make that more easily done. So I love the idea that the members actually came to the to the electric co-op itself and said, "Hey, can you extend this to our homes?" What were the hurdles at the time, if you're aware of the origins here?
Yeah, the DMEA had been in the internet business before, providing just a dial-up service back in the early 90s and early 2000s. But, it just wasn't a successful venture. As, the story for most dial-up internet solutions. It was a Band-Aid for a while. And so it wasn't like DMEA wasn't gun shy. I mean, we
Mhm.
certainly were apprehensive about getting into that business. So, we commissioned a full business case, took it quite seriously, really ran the numbers to make sure it was a sustainable business, not something that we were just going to get into, dump a bunch of money in, and then not have a sustainable service offering, 5, 10, 15 years into the project. So it was, taken with a high degree of seriousness and sensitivities. But the board meeting, last board meeting in 2015, it was a unanimous vote in support of it, but it wasn't without a lot of debate and consideration. Then became kind of the technology review and the internal assessment. So as much as a business case helped the board kind of make that, firm up their decision, it became a staff decision on, choosing the right technology, choosing the right architecture to make sure, that we were, investing the money wisely. And
Yeah.
so it came with a lot of heavy thought and consideration before we kind of dove off.
Yeah, and I bet by the time the pandemic came around, you all were pretty glad that you made that decision.
Yes, for sure. The pandemic obviously took, something that was already underway and put a higher degree of emphasis.
Yeah.
Suddenly, the anxiety for the community, needing it now, wanting it now, just really became a big, loud voice that we needed to satisfy.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about this project that DMEA got funding for through the American Rescue Plan. But before I get to that, really quickly, prior to that, were you building out with federal funds, or what? How are you supporting DMEA's build out to begin with?
So we started with a just polling the communities. We kind of
Hmm.
divided the network up into pockets. Used a product called Crowd Fiber to where members in the community could commit to participating in the service, and thereby the areas that had the strongest levels of interest we would build first. Strangely, the first area that we built out was a tiny town called Paonia here in Colorado. It's not even 1,000 people strong, but yet they spoke the loudest, and thereby we went and secured a state grant to build that community first. And it was it was a good business case for the time. It showed that we would get good revenue right out of the gate, and it worked. It helped us to, start in areas where we could get revenue to support further build out, and the eventually working into the further harder to reach areas, much like the project that you've mentioned that we got the ARPA funding for.
Yes, that I keep seeding into the conversation. So I'll pivot to that now. So, okay. So as you mentioned, of course, this project was already starting to service areas of the Montrose community. But this area that we're about to talk about was a harder to reach region. So tell me a bit about the connectivity issues that we're facing this particular area that you got the funding for, which covers also Gunnison National Park, which I would also love to hear a little bit about. Unfortunately, I've never been there. Maybe I will after this conversation. Jet over.
Yeah,
Yeah,
certainly,
tell us a bit.
certainly
Tell
have
us
to
a
put it
bit.
on your bucket list.
Definitely.
It's
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, I've been to Red Rocks now officially, so now I have to add another cool Colorado outdoor establishment to my bucket list. But
absolutely.
yes, so tell us a bit about the actual connectivity issues you all were facing for the park and the surrounding regions.
Yeah, so the rural Colorado is just that. I mean, it's mountainous, it's tough terrain, it is challenging in every sense of the meaning of rural living. And for us, we have 2,400 miles of electric primary line, as we deem it, that we knew we needed to build with fiber optics to get connectivity to all 36,000 of our electric meters. And so, as we were building out these pockets, obviously the more populous areas were the easier places to build, and the areas where we got more of that crowd fiber participation to build earlier and quicker. But as we started to realize, these longer line sections, much like the park area that we mentioned, it became more and more evident that we needed good, big grant subsidy programs to really help offset some of the cost, or else it was going to be an untenable price tag to build to some of these areas. So fast forward to COVID, put a lot of emphasis within that. The American Rescue Plan Act came into it allowed for what was the state local fiscal recovery funds, SLFRF funding, for which Colorado had earmarked about $135 million for, these harder to reach areas, just like it was our Greater Gunnison Gorge project. It consisted of about 1,250 premises. Ultimately, we were able to put some of our own funding along with it to enhance the build out and reach a total of about 1,700 premises. But yeah, it was a $9 million project. The SLFRF funding brought in about $6 million of that funding needed to build the project, and without it, we simply could not have made this happen.
Excellent. So what was the timeline for this? When did you all apply for the grant? When did the build out start, and is the project complete?
Project is complete, yes. The funding came about in March of 2021. We finally got the funding award, I think it was September of 2021. It was about a 2-year build out, so we actually finished it in 2023. So, it's been in place for a good while now. But the project's been finished. It was 350 miles of construction, and it was pretty challenging at times. For the park itself, the park sits 7 miles off the beaten path, off of the highway, if you will, and much of it, as the name of national park implies, is pristine, uninterrupted territory that just does not need the interruption or the scarring of a major construction project. So fortunately for us, we had a local contractor that understood the sensitivities of the geography and understood the challenges, understood the heavy rock, the mountainous situation, and they actually, unbeknownst to us or unplanned by us, they employed a team of horses to actually pull fiber through some of the harder parts of this build, and just to keep the vegetation, just to keep the terrain from having to take unnecessary damage or just clear cutting to get the fiber down through there.
I think you're the first person on this podcast or in my life at all to ever tell me that horses helped deploy fiber somewhere. That's extremely cool. I hope they took pictures of this, because that's incredible.
Yeah, I've been in this industry for 34 years and built out on Indian reservations and well, now rural Colorado, many places, and this is the only project I've ever seen a team of horses use for.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not just in the dark on horse fiber deployments. This is actually something unique. Very interesting. Just to play devil's advocate here for a second, because there is an ongoing debate in this country about satellite versus fiber when it comes to the hardest to reach regions. Based on what you're describing, some people might say that seems like a region to just deal with to just use satellite communications to deal with the connectivity problems, rather than having horses traipse through rock and deploy fiber. But give me your argument for why this region and the park specifically should have fiber technology.
Yeah, wireless of any kind, whether it's satellite fed, whether it's cellular fed, whether it's your wireless ISPs using, even the semi regulated frequencies. You always have interruption challenges, and the park itself, while they had twisted pair copper solutions. They had DSL, they had, regular telephone lines. The lack of reliability, even for the wired copper solutions, was not sustainable. And then you suggest bringing in another, imperfect technology to try and deliver services to a place like this where there are so many visitors. There's 350,000 visitors annually that ascend on this location, some camping out overnight, some, descending 2,000 feet down into the valley of the canyon itself. So it presents a lot of safety concerns. It presents a lot of challenges that truly locations like this deserve and need a wired connection that is dependable and reliable, and for the public safety factors, but equally for the dependability of just charging admission to get into the park. The 3 times I've been out there myself, all prior to our build, taking family and friends out there, the park DSL connection was always down and they could never charge admission. So if you think about it, it's typically a $30 price tag per car to go into the park, 350,000 visitors a year. I mean, that equates to a lot of funding that the park was just missing out on.
They were just literally losing that revenue because they couldn't access the internet to charge people.
Exactly.
Okay. That's wild. So, okay, on that sense, then some visitors may not be thrilled that you got fiber hookup because now they have to pay their entrance fee. But if I'm a visitor to the park, why am I happy now other than having to pay my entrance fee? What does it mean for me as a visitor to that park to have that connectivity?
That's a great question. So, on the park's website, we found just this morning that they are now even promoting that there's public Wi-Fi. The cellular signal there in the park is very challenging, very spottish at best. And, if you have an emergency, you don't want to have to drive 7 miles back to the highway to be able to get an emergency signal out. If, you're there at the park, they had it was a button on the wall that was labeled 911. So for 4 years now, that button did not work. The connectivity via the twisted pair copper lines just simply failed that 911 ring down circuit. So getting our fiber there, it brought safety factors. It brought even at the visitor center there, it was challenging for vendors to sell drinks or sell snacks or whatever. Now
Sure.
there is a retail existence. There is a public Wi-Fi existence. There is the ability to make connectivity when you need it. And then equally, the park had identified a communications tower location. We've gone ahead, placed fiber for that. They have a future plan to create a communication link to actually get emergency communications down into the base of 2,000 feet down in the canyon itself. So somebody's injured down on the river or down in the base of that canyon, they too will soon be able to get emergency connectivity down there.
Okay, very, very interesting. I was just thinking as you were talking, I'm wondering what this project has led to in terms of more ideas for how connectivity can further enhance the park. That's one way that you're illuminating here. Are there other ideas that have come about what fiber optics can bring to the park or the region in general? And also, given that you needed horses to deploy the network to begin with, what does upkeep look like for a network like this, and what resources will help you guys upkeep this network? I'm thinking as we're talking about the Universal Service Fund, which is in a bit of murky territory at the moment, but I imagine those kind of funds are necessary in a region like this. But you tell me, what does upkeep look like, and what is future connectivity what do future connectivity possibilities look like for the park?
Yeah, obviously we built the network with hopes of it being a 40-year, 50-year investment. We buried the fiber optic lines everywhere we had buried electric service lines. So, obviously buried infrastructure tends to last longer, especially in a place like the park where there's not a lot of, regular digging that happens. But then, we placed the lines on overhead poles where the electric service was overhead as well.
Mm-hmm.
In those instances, we have to keep the lines maintained, the aerial lines, trimmed vegetation regularly for that. So, those are typically in the less sensitive areas, the areas leading up to the park itself. Most of the lines on the park property itself were buried. So, hopefully the maintenance and upkeep, much as our electric infrastructure has proven, should be, largely hands off. Added enhancements for the park. They have an office complex there, for the national park employees. Before their data connectivity was very de minimis, very underperforming. They often would have to come back into town, find a library or something to do critical work to sustain their offices. But now they actually have a true functioning office building there that they can truly use it for the full potential that it is.
That's excellent. And this project, in addition to the park, it covered roughly, I think you said like 1,200-ish locations. Is that right in the region?
The grant project was 1,200 locations. It's not necessarily inside the park. The park,
sure, yeah. So I wanted to know: are those mostly homes? What constitutes those 1,200 locations?
Yeah, I would say 95% of that is homes. There was a small concentration of small businesses here and there, but for the most part, it is residential homes.
And I guess last question then is, what has the response from the community been to this project and to getting this connectivity with the help of the grant?
The grant was, heralded, much by the community, county commissioners, city officials. Everybody was really highly supportive of the project as a whole. We're now about 85% built to all of our electric members. And, without the community support, without the, even the individual members of our co-op, supporting it as well as they have, there's just no way we could have, reached this point. We now have, a full build out plan. Within the next 2 years, we will have reached the last of our 100% goal. So definitely getting to that exciting place of getting this done.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I lied because now I do have one follow-up for you. So that is already in the timeline. You're planning to build out to 100% of the membership. Do you need more grant funding to make that happen? Or is this the plan regardless of available funding?
So we have one grant application that's still being considered. Okay. It is for the BEAD funding. The BEAD funding has been widely publicized. The uncertainty of, what will become of the BEAD programming and when that funding will be released. For us, it will get us to the last of the most difficult 500 premises to serve.
Yeah.
We have one last request that will help us to make this happen.
Okay. Well, I hope that you win that funding and will come back and talk to me about connecting those last homes. Thank you so much. This has been great. What an exciting project. Yeah,
thank you, Nicole. This has been fun.
Thank you again, Kent, for joining me. Thank you as well to Pierre Landriau for editing this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Light Reading Podcast for more episodes of The Divide, as well as interviews and insights from the Light Reading team. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.